People think fate announces itself with fireworks. Mine arrived as a worn leather diary left behind on a polished mahogany table. The jazz music inside Moretti's club drifted through the crystal chandeliers like smoke, soft enough to calm wealthy guests, loud enough to bury whispered deals that should never reach daylight. Outside, Manhattan shimmered beneath a curtain of cold October rain. Every streetlight reflected across the wet pavement like broken gold. I tightened my coat around my shoulders and glanced at my phone for what felt like the 100th time. 10:47 p.m. No missed calls. Good. Noah had finally fallen asleep before I left for work, his forehead still warm from the fever that had lingered all afternoon. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly widow who lived across the hall, had promised to stay with him until I returned. She never accepted money. She always said kindness was cheaper than regret. I wish life worked that way. At 28, I had mastered the art of pretending everything was fine. Smile. Take orders. Avoid questions. Hide exhaustion behind lipstick and a polite voice. Working private events at the city's most exclusive club paid twice what ordinary restaurants offered, and double pay meant another week of rent, another prescription refill for Noah's asthma, another chance to postpone choosing between groceries and electricity. That was enough. Or at least I kept telling myself it was. I slipped behind the employee entrance, nodded to security, and tied my dark hair into a cleaner ponytail before stepping into the ballroom. The room glittered with impossible wealth. Italian marble stretched beneath designer shoes. Crystal glasses caught golden light. Women laughed behind diamonds that probably cost more than every paycheck I had earned in the last decade. Men in tailored suits discussed investments, shipping routes, and numbers so large they sounded fictional. I belonged to none of it, which made me nearly invisible. Invisible was safe. Invisible paid the bills. The small leather diary rested inside my canvas tote, tucked between Noah's inhaler, my wallet, and a paperback novel whose ending I had never found time to read. It wasn't just a diary. It was the only place where I allowed myself to tell the truth. Every fear, every unpaid bill, every birthday I celebrated alone with my little boy, every memory I refused to let Noah carry. Sometimes writing was cheaper than therapy. Sometimes ink was the only witness willing to listen. Near midnight, my phone vibrated so violently that I almost dropped a tray filled with champagne flutes. Mrs. Henderson. A cold knot formed instantly in my stomach. Claire, she whispered before I could even speak. Honey, Noah's fever just hit 104. He's struggling to breathe. Everything around me disappeared. The music, the conversations, the laughter. Only my son's breathing remained inside my head. I'm coming. I didn't wait for permission. Didn't explain. Didn't care. I untied my apron while running through the marble hallway, my heartbeat pounding louder than the orchestra behind me. Rain exploded against the glass entrance as I rushed into the parking lot, fumbling for my car keys with trembling hands. My canvas tote slipped from my shoulder for only a second before I caught it again. Or at least, I thought I had. The engine roared to life. I sped into the rain toward the hospital without looking back. Behind me, unnoticed beneath the soft amber light of the private VIP lounge, a weathered brown leather diary lay quietly on a polished table. 5 minutes later, a tall man in a perfectly tailored black suit entered the now empty room. Everyone else lowered their eyes. He didn't notice the expensive whiskey waiting beside his chair. He noticed the forgotten diary. Then, almost absent-mindedly, Ethan Moretti picked it up. The most dangerous secrets are never hidden inside safes. They hide inside ordinary words written by ordinary people. The leather diary felt surprisingly light in Ethan Moretti's hand. Dark brown, weathered around the edges. The elastic band had begun to fray, as though it had been opened and closed thousands of times by fingers that carried more worries than jewelry. He glanced toward the club manager. Lost and found. The older man shrugged. Our staff checked every reservation. Nobody claimed it. Ethan nodded once. Leave it. The manager disappeared without another question. People rarely questioned Ethan. Not because he raised his voice. Because he never had to. Silence carried farther than shouting when your name alone could stop conversations. The private lounge gradually emptied. Crystal glasses were cleared away. Musicians packed their instruments. The city beyond the panoramic windows shimmered beneath relentless rain, transforming Manhattan into a sea of blurred lights. Ethan loosened his tie, and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. It had been another 16-hour day. 3 negotiations. 1 betrayal. 2 shipments delayed. Power looked glamorous from the outside. From the inside, it was simply exhausting. The forgotten diary remained on the polished walnut table beside his drink. He had no intention of invading a stranger's privacy. He picked it up only to look for identification. Nothing. No driver's license. No business card. Only neat handwriting decorating the inside cover. Claire Bennett. No address. No phone number. Just a name. He exhaled quietly. Maybe there was a receipt tucked between the pages. Maybe a bill. Anything that could help return it. His thumbs separated the first page. October 3rd. Today Noah asked why every other kid has someone waiting outside school except him. Ethan's eyes stopped moving. He almost closed the diary immediately. Almost. Instead, another line caught him. I told him heroes don't always wear suits. A faint smile touched one corner of his mouth. Children believed almost anything when their mothers spoke with enough love. He turned another page. October 11th. Rent is late again. Noah needs another inhaler. I smiled through my entire shift tonight because customers tip happier waitresses. The smile disappeared. He knew women like Claire existed. He funded children's hospitals. He donated millions every year through foundations that never carried his real name. Yet words written without expecting anyone to read them carried a different weight. There was no performance here. No audience. Only truth. Another page. November 2nd. Sometimes I wish someone would ask how I'm doing and actually wait for the answer. The room felt strangely quiet. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. Inside, the only sound came from melting ice against crystal. Ethan closed the diary. This wasn't his business. Tomorrow his assistant would review security footage. They would find Claire Bennett. Return the diary. End of story. That should have been enough. His fingers rested on the worn leather cover for several long seconds. Then, almost against his own judgment, he opened it again. Near the back, the handwriting had become less steady. Ink blurred in places where tears had dried years ago. The entries grew shorter, more fragile, as if hope itself had become too expensive to waste on long sentences. Finally, he reached the last completed page. There was only one paragraph. One final confession. If anything ever happens to me. His jaw tightened. Please tell Noah I never lied because I wanted to. Another line. Tell him I kept every promise except one. His heartbeat slowed. Then his eyes reached the final sentence. And if he ever asks who his father was, tell him the man with the silver wolf ring never knew he had a son. The glass slipped from Ethan's fingers. Amber whiskey splashed across the Persian rug. He didn't notice. His breathing stopped. Slowly, almost mechanically, he lowered his eyes toward his own right hand. Resting against the mahogany table was a heavy silver ring. A wolf's head carved into solid platinum. One of a kind. A ring no one else in New York possessed. For the first time in over 10 years. Ethan Moretti felt something he thought had died long ago. Fear. Power teaches you how to control other people. The truth teaches you how little control you ever had. The office remained perfectly still. Only the rain dared to interrupt the silence. It drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, each drop sliding down the glass like forgotten memories refusing to disappear. Ethan Moretti stood without moving. The diary remained open on his desk. The final sentence stared back at him as if it had been waiting 10 years to be read. A man with the silver wolf ring. Impossible. There had never been another ring. His father had commissioned it from an Italian jeweler before Ethan turned 25. It wasn't merely jewelry. It was a symbol, a promise. Every Moretti boss wore it. Every rival recognized it. There was only one. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Buzzed again. Ignored. The third vibration stopped only after his consigliere entered without knocking. Victor Romano had worked beside Ethan for almost 15 years. If Ethan was the storm, Victor was the man who quietly measured the damage afterward. You've got people waiting downstairs. No. Victor frowned. No. Cancel everything. That single sentence was enough to erase an entire night's schedule. Victor noticed the broken whiskey glass. Then the diary. Then Ethan's face. What happened? For several seconds. Nothing. Finally, Ethan closed the leather cover with surprising care. I need every camera recording from tonight. Victor blinked. The club. Every hallway. Every entrance. Every exit. Every parking camera. Find the woman who lost this. Victor looked genuinely confused. You don't even know who she is? I know her name. He slid the diary across the desk. Victor glanced at the first page. Claire Bennett. Nothing else. No last name in our database. No membership. No reservation. No connection. Ethan interrupted him. Then create one. Victor had learned long ago not to ask unnecessary questions. Still, something about tonight felt different. Not dangerous. Personal. Far more dangerous. I'll have security pull every recording. I want it in 30 minutes. Victor nodded once before disappearing. The office fell silent again. Ethan looked back toward the skyline. His reflection stared at him through the rain-covered glass. Calm. Controlled. Untouchable. A lie. His mind had already traveled 10 years into the past. A charity gala. A downtown hotel. He had slipped away from the ballroom after an argument with his father. Too much pressure. Too many expectations. He remembered walking alone beneath the rain. He remembered lending his jacket to a young woman standing at a bus stop because she was shivering. She had laughed. Not because he was rich. Because he looked miserable in an expensive suit. You should smile more, she had told him. No one had ever spoken to Ethan Moretti like that. For one single night. He hadn't been the heir to an empire. He had simply been Ethan. Then, everything became blurred. A phone call. An emergency overseas. His father's orders. A private jet before sunrise. Months of violence. Years of building an empire. The memory had slowly disappeared beneath blood, business, and survival. Until tonight. His breathing became heavier. Could Claire be? No. He refused to believe in coincidences. His phone rang again. This time Victor. I found her. Ethan answered immediately. Talk. Security footage caught her entering through the employee entrance at 6:14. Employee? Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. Keep going. She isn't a guest. She worked tonight. Victor paused. And? What? She left the club after receiving a phone call. Ethan waited. She was crying. A strange pressure settled inside his chest. Where did she go? Victor hesitated. We tracked her car. It drove straight to St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. Silence. Then another sentence. She never came back for the diary. Ethan slowly looked down at the leather cover resting beneath his hand. A woman who worked 2 jobs. A little boy named Noah. A children's hospital in the middle of the night. And one sentence that had shattered a decade of certainty. For the first time in years. The most feared man in New York wasn't thinking about enemies. He was thinking about a mother who had run through the rain carrying fear instead of hope. Without another word, Ethan reached for his coat. Prepare the car. Victor stopped. Where are we going? Ethan's answer was barely above a whisper. To the hospital. Because for the first time in 10 years, he needed answers more than he needed power. Some people spend years searching for the truth. Others find it standing quietly outside a hospital room. The black Rolls-Royce stopped beneath the emergency entrance without a sound. Rain continued to pour over the city, washing neon reflections across the pavement like liquid silver. St. Catherine's Children's Hospital never truly slept. Ambulances arrived. Doctors hurried through automatic doors. Parents waited with tired eyes that had forgotten what rest felt like. Ethan stepped out alone. His security team instinctively moved toward him. He raised one hand. No one comes inside. The men exchanged uneasy glances but obeyed. Inside these walls, power meant nothing. Money couldn't lower a fever. Fear couldn't be negotiated. The smell of antiseptic replaced the scent of expensive whiskey that still lingered on his coat. Children's laughter echoed faintly from somewhere down the corridor. So did quiet crying. Ethan hated hospitals. Too many memories began here. Too many endings did too. Victor caught up beside him, holding a slim tablet. I found her employee records. Ethan took it without slowing. Claire Bennett, 28. Part-time waitress. Part-time bookstore clerk. No criminal record. No debt collectors. No luxury purchases. Nothing unusual. Nothing connected to organized crime. Nothing connected to him. Almost nothing. Victor cleared his throat. She has one dependent. Ethan already knew. Noah Bennett. Age 6. Diagnosed with severe asthma at 3 years old. Multiple emergency admissions. Ethan stopped walking. Father. Victor looked down. The birth certificate field is blank. Silence settled between them. Not because there was nothing to say. Because everything suddenly mattered. At the end of the hallway, Ethan noticed a woman sitting outside room 214. Her elbows rested on her knees. Both hands covered her face. Her shoulders trembled with silent exhaustion rather than tears. Claire. She looked different without the restaurant uniform. Smaller. Paler. The confidence she wore while serving wealthy strangers had disappeared. Only a mother remained. A nurse approached and gently touched her shoulder. You should get some coffee. Claire forced a tired smile. I'm okay. You haven't slept. I'll sleep when his fever breaks. The nurse nodded sympathetically before walking away. Claire leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. For just a second, long enough for Ethan to notice the dark circles beneath them, long enough to realize she wasn't pretending to be strong. She simply didn't have another choice. He stayed hidden around the corner, watching, listening, doing something he had never done before. Waiting. A little boy's weak voice drifted from inside the room. Mom. Claire was on her feet instantly. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm sorry I got sick. Ethan felt something tighten painfully inside his chest. You never have to apologize for being sick. I'm expensive. Claire laughed softly despite herself. No. You are priceless. The door closed behind her. The hallway became quiet again. Victor lowered his voice. You want me to introduce you? No. You sure? If I walk in there tonight. Ethan looked toward the hospital room. I'll walk in as a stranger carrying questions she doesn't deserve. Victor remained silent. For years he had watched Ethan intimidate politicians, negotiate with billionaires, and dismantle criminal organizations without hesitation. Tonight, one exhausted single mother had left him completely uncertain. Minutes later, the attending physician exited room 214. Claire followed closely behind. His fever is responding, the doctor said gently. But he'll need medication immediately after discharge. Claire nodded. I'll find a way. The pharmacy closes at 7 tomorrow. I understand. She reached into her worn handbag, then froze. Her wallet, insurance card, cash. Everything was there. Everything. Except the one thing she searched for. Her diary. Confusion slowly spread across her face. She searched again. Faster this time. Her breathing became uneven. No. She whispered it to herself. No, no, no. That diary wasn't just paper. It held every memory she had protected for 6 years. Every promise. Every truth she couldn't say aloud. And now, it was gone. From the shadows at the end of the hallway, Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment. He understood exactly what she had just realized. She wasn't mourning a lost notebook. She was mourning the possibility that someone had already read the one secret she had spent years trying to keep alive. And for the first time since finding the diary, Ethan knew one thing with absolute certainty. Returning it would never be as simple as handing it back. The strongest people are often the ones who refuse help, not because they don't need it, but because they've learned it always comes with a price. Morning arrived wrapped in gray clouds. The rain had stopped, but the city still looked washed in yesterday's sorrow. Claire sat beside Noah's hospital bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his small chest. His fever had finally broken. For the first time in hours, he was sleeping peacefully. She brushed a strand of blonde hair away from his forehead before forcing herself to smile. We made it through another night, she whispered. No one answered. She wasn't expecting anyone to. Outside the room, nurses changed shifts while doctors hurried through another impossible day. Life kept moving. Bills kept waiting. Reality never paused simply because someone was exhausted. Claire quietly left the room and approached the billing desk. The young receptionist offered a sympathetic smile. The pharmacy has your son's medication ready. Claire nodded. How much? The woman looked at the screen. Claire noticed the hesitation before she heard the number. It was more than she had left in her checking account. Far more. Claire swallowed hard. Can I pay half today? I'm sorry. The system doesn't allow partial payment. Claire thanked her anyway. She walked toward the nearest window and stared outside. She had exactly $37 in cash. Rent was due next week. Her second job didn't pay until Friday. She closed her eyes. Think. Sell something. Borrow. Work another shift. Anything. Just keep moving. Giving up had never been one of her options. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Miss Bennett. She turned. The attending physician approached with Noah's chart tucked beneath one arm. He's responding very well. Relief softened her shoulders. When can we go home? This afternoon. Then his expression became more serious. But please don't delay filling his prescription. I won't. She answered immediately, even if she had no idea how. The doctor smiled politely before leaving. Claire reached into her handbag once more. Wallet, keys, insurance paperwork, receipts. Still no diary. Her heart sank all over again. She remembered every page inside it. Every birthday letter she had written to Noah. Every fear she had never spoken aloud. Every memory from 10 years ago. If a stranger had opened it. No, she couldn't think about that now. First Noah. Everything else could wait. Across the street, inside a black sedan parked beneath a row of maple trees, Ethan watched the hospital entrance through lightly tinted glass. He had been there since sunrise. Not because he doubted the security reports. Because reports never captured the way people carried pain. Victor lowered a folder onto the center console. I finished digging. Ethan opened it. Employment history. Medical records. School transcripts. Everything legal his investigators could obtain overnight. One page caught his attention immediately. Claire Bennett had declined financial assistance 3 different times. Different charities. Different organizations. Same answer. Declined. Victor noticed his reaction. Most people would have accepted. She didn't. Why? Ethan closed the file. Because pride isn't arrogance. It's survival. Another report waited beneath it. Hospital payment status. Outstanding balance. Prescription pending. Ethan looked toward the pharmacy entrance. A simple phone call could erase every debt. Another phone call could place enough money into Claire's account to change her life forever. His people could solve every problem before lunchtime. It would take less than 5 minutes. Instead, he remained perfectly still. Victor looked confused. You're not helping? I am. When she can't trace it back to me. Victor leaned back against the seat. You've never cared about being anonymous before. Ethan's eyes never left the hospital doors. This isn't about earning gratitude. It's about protecting dignity. At that exact moment, Claire stepped outside, holding Noah's small hand. The little boy wore an oversized blue hoodie and carried a stuffed rabbit with one missing ear. He looked up at his mother. Mom, yes. When I get bigger, I'm going to buy you a house. Claire laughed softly. You already gave me one. He frowned. I did. You made my heart your home. Neither of them noticed the man watching from across the street. But Ethan felt those simple words strike harder than any threat he had faced in years. Power had built him an empire. Love had built her a family. And somehow, she had accomplished the harder miracle. Sometimes the past doesn't return as a memory. It returns as a person who has been waiting for the truth longer than you have. Claire and Noah had been home for 3 days. Their apartment was small enough that the kitchen blended into the living room, and the living room blended into Noah's bedroom behind a faded blue curtain. It wasn't much, but every corner carried warmth instead of luxury. A second-hand bookshelf leaned slightly against the wall. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator with mismatched magnets. A tiny pair of sneakers rested beside the front door. It looked nothing like Ethan Moretti's penthouse. Yet somehow, it felt more alive. Claire unpacked the paper bag from the pharmacy. 1 inhaler. 1 bottle of antibiotics. 1 receipt. She frowned. The total was impossible. She counted the amount twice. Someone had paid almost everything. The pharmacist had only asked for $37. Exactly the amount she still had. There must be a mistake, she had insisted. The pharmacist simply smiled. It was handled this morning. By who? I'm sorry. I don't know. Claire knew better. Nothing in life happened by accident. Someone had helped her. Someone who wanted to remain invisible. She wasn't sure whether that comforted or frightened her. That evening, as Noah colored dinosaurs across the coffee table, someone knocked softly on the apartment door. Claire opened it carefully. Mrs. Henderson stood there carrying a small cardboard box. This was delivered while you were picking Noah up from school. No name. The elderly woman shook her head. Only your address. Claire thanked her before closing the door. The package wasn't expensive. No ribbon. No company logo. Just plain brown cardboard. Inside, wrapped in white tissue paper, lay her leather diary. Her breath caught instantly. She lifted it with both hands, almost afraid to touch it. The elastic band had been carefully replaced with a brand new one. The worn corners had been restored. Someone had even repaired the loose stitching along the spine. Nothing else had changed. Or so it seemed. A folded cream-colored envelope rested beneath it. No signature. Only one sentence written in elegant handwriting. Some memories deserve to be protected. Others deserve to be found. Claire slowly sat down. Her hands trembled. She opened the diary. Every page remained exactly where she had left it. Every word, every tear stain, every confession, until she reached the final page. There, pressed carefully between the paper, was something that had never belonged there before. A faded photograph. Claire's heartbeat stopped. The picture showed a charity gala from 10 years earlier. A young woman wearing a borrowed navy blue dress. A young man standing beside her beneath a hotel awning while rain poured around them. She remembered that night. She remembered laughing because he had looked completely miserable, holding an umbrella that kept turning inside out. She remembered borrowing his jacket. She remembered talking for hours without asking his last name. She remembered the silver wolf ring catching the streetlight. She had never known someone had taken a photograph. Tears blurred her vision. No, she whispered. No. Across the city, Ethan stood inside his office, looking at an identical copy of the same photograph. Victor entered quietly. You really sent it back? Yes. You repaired it? Yes. You paid the hospital? Ethan remained silent. Victor studied him for a long moment. You also left the picture. Finally, Ethan answered. She deserves to know I'm looking for the truth. Victor folded his arms. And if she remembers you? Ethan stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows where sunset painted Manhattan in shades of gold and crimson. I hope she does. And if she hates you? A long silence followed, the kind that carried years of regret. I wouldn't blame her. Victor nodded slowly. There is one more thing. Ethan turned. We finally identified everyone who attended that charity gala. Victor placed another file on the desk. One guest disappeared the very next morning. Ethan looked at the name. His expression hardened instantly. The smile vanished from his face. Because the man listed in the report wasn't a stranger. He had once been one of Ethan's most trusted advisors. The same man who had arranged Ethan's emergency flight overseas. The same man who had insisted there was no reason to return. The same man who had died 6 years ago without ever explaining why. The cruelest lies are not the ones people tell. They are the years those lies steal. Ethan had spent his entire life believing that every problem had a solution. Money, influence, information. One of them always worked. Until now. The thin file Victor had placed on his desk refused to leave his hands. Across the top of the page, one name was highlighted in black ink. Richard Hale. 10 years ago, Richard had been Ethan's father's most trusted advisor. He handled travel, security, private communications. Nothing reached the Moretti family without passing through him first. Ethan remembered the night after the charity gala with startling clarity. His father had called before sunrise. A deal in Sicily has collapsed. The jet leaves in 40 minutes. Ethan had argued. He wanted one more day in New York. One more chance to see the young woman who had laughed at his expensive umbrella. Richard had stepped forward with reassuring confidence. If she wants to find you, she will. I'll make sure she gets your number. Ethan had believed him. He boarded the jet and never heard another word. Victor broke the silence. We searched Richard's archived records. Ethan looked up, and there was a sealed envelope. Victor placed it gently beside the file. It was never delivered. The paper had yellowed with age. The seal had already been broken by the investigation team. Inside was a single handwritten letter. Claire's handwriting. Ethan recognized it instantly. His pulse quickened as he began to read. Ethan, I don't know your last name, so I'm trusting Richard when he says he'll give this to you. I'm leaving because I don't want to become a burden. But before I go, you deserve to know I'm pregnant. The room disappeared. His eyes continued moving across the page. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for promises. I only thought you should know. If fate ever brings us together again, I'll tell our child that his father once made a frightened girl believe good men still existed. The letter ended there. No anger. No accusation. Only hope. Hope that had never reached him. Ethan folded the paper with trembling hands. For years, he had blamed himself for forgetting. Now he realized. He had never been given the chance to remember. Victor spoke carefully. There was another document. A photocopy slid across the desk. An airline manifest. Richard Hale had booked a second ticket to Boston. Claire Bennett's name appeared beside it. But she never boarded, Victor said. Our investigators believe Richard told her you had chosen to leave permanently. Ethan closed his eyes. One lie. Spoken to 2 different people. Enough to destroy 10 years. At that same moment, Claire stood inside the neighborhood bookstore where she worked 3 afternoons each week. The restored diary remained in her locker. The old photograph stayed inside her coat pocket. She had looked at it a dozen times already. The man's face was older now, harder, but his eyes. She would never forget those eyes. The bell above the bookstore door chimed. An elderly customer smiled at Noah, who sat quietly in the children's corner reading a picture book. "You've got a polite little boy," Claire smiled back. "He teaches me every day." Noah looked up. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you think my dad ever reads books?" The question stole the air from her lungs. She knelt beside him. "I don't know. Do you think he was a good man?" Claire hesitated. She remembered one rainy night, one borrowed jacket, one gentle smile. "I think." Her voice softened. "I think he wanted to be." Across the city, Ethan slipped Claire's undelivered letter back into its envelope. He made only one decision. Not as a mafia boss. Not as the head of the Moretti empire. Simply as a man who had lost 10 years he could never reclaim. He looked at Victor. "Find Richard Hale's family." Victor frowned. "He's been dead for 6 years." "I know." Ethan's eyes hardened with quiet determination. "But dead men leave shadows. And somewhere inside those shadows is the person who helped him bury the truth. Forgiveness is never earned by explaining the past. It begins when someone risks losing everything to tell the truth." The bookstore smelled of old paper and fresh coffee. It was Claire's favorite place in the world. Books never judged. They simply waited. Late that afternoon, Noah sat cross-legged in the children's section, carefully sounding out words from a book about astronauts while Claire arranged new arrivals on the shelves. The bell above the entrance chimed. She looked up automatically. A man stepped inside wearing a charcoal overcoat. No bodyguards. No expensive watch visible beneath his sleeve. No air of importance. Only a quiet pair of gray eyes she had seen once before. 10 years ago. The stack of books slipped from Claire's hands. They landed softly on the wooden floor. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Time folded in on itself. She wasn't looking at the feared head of the Moretti empire. She was looking at the young man who had stood beside her beneath a broken umbrella on a rainy night. Ethan. His name escaped her lips before she realized she still remembered it. A faint, almost painful smile crossed his face. "You remembered." "I tried not to." The honesty in her answer struck harder than anger ever could. Noah looked up from his book. "Mom." Claire forced herself to breathe. "It's okay, sweetheart." Ethan remained several feet away, far enough that she wouldn't feel cornered, close enough that the silence between them carried every unanswered question. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Claire shook her head. "No. You owe me the truth." He nodded. "I do." The bookstore had emptied minutes earlier. Only the soft ticking of an old wall clock remained. Ethan slowly reached inside his coat. Claire instinctively stiffened. He noticed. Instead of moving closer, he placed a weathered envelope on the nearest table and stepped back. "I found this." She recognized her own handwriting immediately. The air left her lungs. "My letter. It never reached me." Claire stared at the envelope without touching it. "I gave it to Richard." "So did I." Ethan's voice remained calm, though every word seemed heavier than the last. "I trusted him." "So did I." Another silence. Different this time. Not built from distance. Built from realization. Claire finally picked up the letter. The paper had aged. The ink had faded slightly, but every word remained exactly as she had written it. She looked back at Ethan. "You never knew?" He slowly shook his head. "I didn't know you were pregnant. I didn't know Noah existed. I didn't know you thought I'd abandoned you." Claire searched his face. People could fake tears. They could fake kindness. They couldn't fake regret that had lived inside them for 10 years. Before she could answer, Noah wandered over holding his picture book. He looked curiously at Ethan. "Mr." Ethan crouched to Noah's eye level without hesitation. "Hi, I'm Ethan." Noah studied him with innocent seriousness. "You look sad." A small laugh escaped Ethan before he could stop it. "I guess I do. My mom says sad people need hugs." Claire's eyes widened. "Noah." Before she could finish, the little boy wrapped both arms around Ethan's neck. The bookstore became perfectly still. Ethan froze. Not because he disliked affection, because no child had ever hugged him without fear. Slowly, almost uncertainly, he returned the embrace. His eyes closed. For one brief moment, the empire, the money, the violence, the endless responsibility, all disappeared. Only the warmth of a little boy remained. Noah stepped back and smiled proudly. "There. Now you don't look so sad." Claire felt tears gather before she realized she was crying. Ethan stood again, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I only came because you deserve to know I never chose to leave. Claire looked at him for a long time, then at the unopened letter in her hands, then at Noah, happily returning to his astronaut book as though he had just solved the world's simplest problem. Finally she spoke. I believe you. Relief flickered across Ethan's face. It lasted only a heartbeat, because the bell above the bookstore door rang once more. Victor stepped inside. His expression was more serious than Claire had ever seen. He walked directly to Ethan. We found him. Ethan's expression hardened instantly. The man who took over Richard Hale's operation is still alive. Victor lowered his voice. And he knows about Claire. The warmth inside the bookstore vanished. In its place came the unmistakable feeling that the truth had arrived. And it hadn't come alone. In the end, the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's becoming the person your child believes you already are. The storm everyone feared never came. Victor's warning had been real. Richard Hale's former associate had indeed discovered Claire's identity months earlier, hoping one day to use it as leverage against the Moretti family. But before he could make a move, Ethan reached him first. No headlines appeared. No police sirens echoed through the city. No names were ever spoken. Some battles ended quietly. This was one of them. When it was over, Ethan gave only one order. Destroy every file. No copies. No leverage. No one touches Claire or Noah again. Victor nodded. It'll be done. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't protecting an empire. He was protecting a family. Weeks passed. Winter slowly surrendered to spring. Sunlight returned to Manhattan. The bookstore windows stayed open a little longer each afternoon. Noah's breathing improved. His laughter returned. Life became wonderfully ordinary. On a bright Saturday morning, Claire unlocked the bookstore before opening hours. She found a familiar man already waiting outside with 2 cups of coffee. One black, one with too much cinnamon. He remembered. She smiled before she realized she was smiling. I thought mafia bosses didn't wait outside bookstores. Ethan laughed softly. I retired from terrible first impressions. She accepted the coffee. I noticed. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the city wake up. There was no need to rush. 10 lost years had taught them that some conversations deserve patience. Across the street, Noah chased pigeons through the small park while Mrs. Henderson watched from a nearby bench. Every few seconds, he looked back to make sure his mother was smiling. She was. Ethan reached into his coat. Claire raised an eyebrow. If that's another letter. It isn't. He held out the old leather diary. Restored. Protected. Still carrying every page she had written. I think this belongs with its author. Claire ran her fingers across the repaired cover. So many things changed because of this little book. Ethan nodded. It found me when I needed it most. She opened to the final page. The sentence she had written years ago remained untouched. Beneath it, there was still enough empty space for something new. She uncapped a pen, thought for a moment, then began to write. Today Noah laughed because his father lost a race to a flock of pigeons. Ethan chuckled. I let him win. Claire continued writing. Some stories begin with heartbreak. Ours survived because the truth finally found us. She handed him the pen. Your turn. He hesitated, then added one final line beneath hers. I spent 10 years believing power could change the world. It took one forgotten diary to change me. Claire closed the diary gently, not because the story had ended, because it no longer needed to hide. At that exact moment, Noah came running toward them, breathless with excitement. I won. You did? Ethan asked. I scared away every pigeon. Ethan pretended to gasp. That makes you the bravest man in New York. Noah grinned. Can we go get pancakes now? Claire laughed. You think about food all the time. I get it from you. No, Ethan said with a smile. I think he gets that from both of us. Noah instinctively slipped one small hand into Claire's, the other into Ethan's. No speeches followed. No dramatic promises. No grand declarations beneath fireworks. Just 3 people walking toward a little diner on a quiet spring morning. The city kept moving around them. Traffic. Footsteps. Coffee shops opening. Strangers hurrying to work. No one noticed the family crossing the street. No one knew how close they had come to never finding one another. Perhaps that was the point. The greatest miracles rarely ask to be seen. Sometimes, They arrive disguised as forgotten pages, second chances, and a child who believes love is as simple as holding both parents' hands. And sometimes, the last page of a diary isn't the end of a story. It's the first page of the life that was always waiting to be written.